Yo, what up? Brad Martineau here, and welcome to another episode of Word of the Week Wednesday. In this episode, we're going to talk about the word leadership. This will be a fun one. I like this conversation. Now, if this happens to be your first episode of Word of the Week Wednesday, first, welcome. And then second, there's a link in the description to a video where I record like the premise of what it is that we're doing here, so you have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. So you can click that link, go watch that video first, or you can just watch this video, and by the end, you'll be like, oh, I get it. It's really not that complex. So let's talk about leadership, okay? Leadership, I feel like, is one of those words that if you ask 10 people what it means, you'll probably get like 20 different answers. And then I actually think if you ask them a week later, you might get 20 different answers from the answers that they gave you the first time. So what I want to do is I want to explore two general aspects or common sort of definitions of leadership. I just want to juxtapose two. One of them I think is really effective. The other one I think is really ineffective. And so the effective one we're going to call leadership. The ineffective one we're going to call authority. And here's why. For me, what I've come to currently and what I've realized for me is the most effective form of leadership is leadership that's about enrollment. And for me, what enrollment means is that any other person that I'm interacting with, and this actually could include myself, but my team members, my family, my friends, the person that I happen to meet at a grocery store, whatever, any other human being that I'm interacting with, every one of those interactions is an opportunity for leadership. And I would actually take it a step further and say it is leadership. It's just a matter of whether it's effective leadership or ineffective leadership. And I believe that effective leadership it results in enrollment, where the person is aware of the options and then willingly can choose if they want to enroll in whatever the thing is that you're trying to get them to enroll. But that's leadership, is you get people to enroll. I feel like commonly, at least my experience has been that commonly when there's conversations around leadership, they talk a lot about it through the lens of like authority or control or command or respect or rules. And so what I want to explore today is when we talk about leadership, let's just look at it through those two different lenses. Like, what does leadership look like? And then what does authority look like? And then at the end, I want to give you a question that I found to be one of the most valuable and powerful questions you can ask as you're trying to transition more towards leadership rather than authority. And the reality is, if I drew a timeline of my life, right, there could be like, oh, Brad acting out of authority, and then Brad acting out of leadership. It's like there's a time when I was like, oh, duh, you should stop doing that. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm just going to give a couple of sort of statements that I wrote down around authority versus leadership. And then I want to give some more specific context of how things would show up like either in work or in like a home setting. So the first premise for me, and you probably got this by now, is that authority does not equal leadership. Leadership creates loyalty because of enrollment. Authority at best, it can produce forced begrudging compliance. And I think one of those is valuable and one of those isn't. So this is like buyer beware when we're talking leadership versus authority. Leadership asks, authority assumes. Leadership listens, authority talks. Leadership has time, authority is too important, or is too busy rather, with more important things. Leadership follows its own rules, authority is a hypocrite. Leadership is focused on an outcome, whereas authority is focused on the plan, and there's no possibility for varying from the plan. Leadership isn't afraid of being wrong. Authority has to be right. Leadership invites being challenged, whereas authority uses threats to discourage being challenged. Leadership empowers by taking away crutches. When I say crutches, it's like, the stuff that we stand on when we're injured, and we have all sorts of crutches, not physically necessarily, but like emotional crutches. Leadership empowers by removing crutches. Authority imprisons by persuading that crutches are necessary. Leadership lets struggle create growth. Authority rescues from struggle. Leadership wants to become obsolete. Authority lives in fear of being replaced. Leadership demonstrates, authority talks. Okay, so those are like some general principles or general statements about leadership versus authority. Let's put this into some more specific scenarios, and then I'll give you my question at the end, and then I want to hear what your takeaways are from this. So, leadership is asking one of my team members at work to do something and getting them to agree. Authority is when I walk by and be like, yo, I need you to do this. I need it done by this time. And then potentially, if necessary, using a threat to create compliance. By the way, the same thing applies at home. Leadership is asking my kids to do something and then getting them to agree and actually creating an agreement. Authority is when I just go tell them like, no, you got to do this. And then maybe I use a threat to get them to do it. Leadership is when I take the time or actually reserve the time to help or talk with a team member who might be struggling or to help them understand what I need them to do. Authority is wondering, why can't they get it? Why can't they see that I'm busy and they just need to figure it out themselves? By the way, same thing applies at home. Leadership is when I actually define time to hang and talk with my kids and figure out what's going on. Authority is when it's like, why are you bugging me? Can't you see that I'm trying to do something for you? Leadership is when I take the time to explain something to a team member or to a child until they're like, oh, I get it. Like I'm explaining why. And it's like, oh, I get it. Authority is when I say or I think like, you just don't get it. This is killing me. Leadership is when I'll have the same conversation over and over again until it finally sticks, again, with a team member or with a child, a son or a daughter, or anybody really. Authority is when I'm surprised that they didn't get it after the first conversation, even though it took me a bunch of those conversations to actually get it. Leadership is when I have no hesitation being like, oh, I'm sorry, or you're right, or I was wrong, without having to add a but. And authority is when I talk over or I end the conversation before I give a team member or one of my kids an actual opportunity to explain themselves. Leadership is when I have a team member at work redo one of their tasks because they didn't do it right. Or I have one of my kids at home rewash the dishes or redo some other chore because they didn't do it right the first time. That's leadership. Authority is when I publicly or privately complain that they didn't do it right the first time while I go do the work for them. Leadership is when my business or my house runs like a well-oiled machine and I don't actually have to do anything. And authority is when I'm running around ragged because nobody else can think and nobody else is aware and nobody else gets it. Okay? So hopefully some of these statements are giving you this idea of like there's just this difference between leadership and authority. And what I've found is everything works better in my businesses, in my family, in my friend relationships. Everything works better when I act through the lens of leadership, which is, again, about enrollment, which means it's one, about informed options, and then two, about complete autonomy to decide whether you want to opt in or not, which means we're going to create a plan together. So here's the question I told you I'd leave you with, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, and there may be some more conversations as we explore this idea of leadership. The most valuable question I found when we're talking about leadership, because of the fact that it has to be enrollment, and because of the fact that they have to be informed, and because of the fact that they have to willingly choose, phenomenal question, is what would need to be true so that whatever thing I'm trying to get them to do. And I'll give you a quick story. This will be out of my personal life with my kids. Quick story just to illustrate this. But this statement of what would need to be true, one of the most powerful questions. I've taught this to my kids. I've told them they should use it with their teachers at school. I told them they should use it everywhere. What would need to be true so that whatever. Okay, so here's the context. It was one of my sons. I don't remember which one, and I don't remember exactly how old he was, but we're going to say somewhere like 8 to 10 or something like that. It's Sunday. We're going to church. The story is not about church. That's just the thing that I wanted to get him to do. And I did not want to take a kid who did not want to be there. And he did not want to be there. He did not want to go. He was already dragging his feet. He's like, I don't want to be there. It's boring. I'm like, bro, I can't really argue with you because church was boring when I was your age as well. But we were all going, and I thought it was valuable for him to go. This is one of the things that I think is important. So insert team member at work needs to accomplish something but doesn't want to. Kid needs to accomplish something or ghost, whatever it is. Another human being you're trying to get them to enroll, or even yourself for that matter. And luckily this interaction happened after that sort of inflection point in my life when I started to realize that leadership was not about authority. Like there was definitely a time in the Brad Martineau timeline that was way more authority based. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me ask you a question, dude. What would it take for you to be excited to go to church? And he kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about, man? I don't even know what that means. And there's no way. It's like, no. And his immediate response was, no, I don't want to go. Like he was like, you didn't hear me. I'm like, no, I heard you. I know you don't want to go. But I also know that we could create something together that would have you get over the fact that you don't want to go. There's something. Like if I go crazy extreme, like if I was going to give you $1 million, he understood the concept of money. I'm going to give you $1 million. You'd probably be like, yeah, I'll go and I'll be happy. Okay, great. I'm not giving you $1 million, but that opens up the conversation that we can create something where you can choose to enroll because it makes sense for you. And I also want you to be clear, like, you don't have to, but let's create something together. You choose, you tell me, try me. So we had a little conversation. I think what we ended up on was, he got to watch a movie and then there was like a dessert or something. I don't know. It's something that we wouldn't have normally done, based on the schedule. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do that. No problem. And he almost didn't believe me at first. Like, are you for real? I'm like, yeah, totally great. So your job is come to church, be happy about it, have a good attitude, and be like, smiling and not sleeping or pouting or complaining. And then we'll go do that. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And then he got ready and we went and everything was fine. And then he watched his movie and it was fine. And it was something I was willing to give him and it was something he was willing to give me. It was enrollment. We created something together. That for me is leadership. It's about recognizing that every single human being is an autonomous individual that gets to make their own decisions. And the way that you get the best version of them is that you enroll them by creating something worth enrolling so that they can freely choose to enroll in it. And I could give you story after story after story in the business context, the exact same thing. Insert somebody's name about a thing that we were trying to do. What would it look like? What would it need to look like? What would need to be true? What do we need to talk about so that you can get excited about this and you can enroll in it? And when I say get excited, I really mean so you can enroll in it. In the case of going to church, I want him to be happy when he was there. I didn't want him pouting. Other times, though, it's like, hey, what will it take to just have you handle this? Like, what do we need to do? And some of you skeptics might be like, that sounds like a lot of conversations I would have with my kids, and then I end up having negotiations and I end up bribing. And I would say, yeah, because leadership and enrollment is about negotiation. And I think bribing is a part of negotiation. So bribing just means we're going to create something that works for you. I think it's one of the most effective parenting tactics that exist, not as a bribe, but as a form of leadership where you get people to enroll. All right, so that's the conversation about leadership versus authority. What I would love to hear is any insights that you take away, like, oh, I could leverage this here. And then what I would also love to hear is go try it. Try it in the next conversation you have with the team member. Try it in the next conversation you have with a kid, with a spouse, with a friend, with a whatever. Try to all right, well, what would it take? Like, let's talk about what would it take to make this happen. Let's want to hear how it plays out. I found it to be extremely valuable in my life. I think you will. I think you will as well. So hopefully this conversation about leadership versus authority has given you a new lens and a new way of looking at how you lead in the different situations. Any questions that come up, post them in the comments. Would love to help. And that's it. So leadership. I will catch you now. Anyway, it's the end of this video. I totally botched the end of that, but that's fine. So end of the video, leadership video is done. I'll catch you in the next episode of Word of the Week Wednesday. Peace. Now I got to find the button that ends this video. All right. Wow, we really botched the end of this. Okay, now, end of the video. Catch you in the next one. All right, see ya.